All right, welcome everybody. I am here with Jeni Arndt, Mayor of Fort Collins. And, I have been looking forward to this for so long. I really have. And we talked a little bit before we started rolling here, but, you were running for state representative back in 2014. And you knocked on the door of where my wife and I lived in Old Town at the time. You took the time to chat with us, talk with us, and you just came across as so authentic and so approachable. And, a few years after that, my wife is in the Leadership Fort Collins program. They travel down to Denver. They get to meet all of these state representatives. These are all very busy people. And she just came back and she said, everyone seemed kind of too busy for us, except for this one person. Jeni Arndt, who's, from Fort Collins, lives in Fort Collins. And that was the person that knocked on our door. And she just talked about how open and kind and generous you were with your time. So that's just some background.
Just keep up with the intro. Yeah. We're going.
So I've watched you since then. I've watched you, just since you've been mayor, 2021. And it's been really fun to see just, I think firm when you need to be firm and just open mind and just a phenomenal job, in my opinion. So welcome,
Thank you.
And excited to learn more about you and your background and share that with everybody that's listening to the show here. A little bit more background, and then you can fill in, tell us more about you. But you have degrees from, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Colorado College, the University of Colorado, Purdue University, background in teaching, Peace Corps, spent time in Mozambique.
Wow, yeah.
And, then back to Fort Collins because you were, 3 weeks old, I believe.
You have done your homework. That is exactly
you've been in Fort Collins that long and, could have lived anywhere, but, you're back to Fort Collins. And tell us more. What was the path to maybe, starting with, the background in teaching and then getting into being in the General Assembly and then ultimately mayor?
Sure. Oh, that was a very nice introduction. And yes, it's all true what you said. So I'm humbled that you did so much background homework, and I'm glad I knocked on your door. I did do 11,000 doors that summer, and it's very satisfying and interesting to do that. It's true. I try not to hurry. I try to always be mindful of the person that I'm talking to right at the moment is going to be the task that I have at hand, and not multitask or have my phones out, because you don't want to trade the one experience you have for something else. So thank you very much for that. So yeah, I did. I grew up here in Fort Collins. I went to Moore, which is now Polaris, Blevins and Pooter. Mm-hmm. And then, as you mentioned, the education and then Peace Corps Morocco. And then that's what made me a teacher. I came back and went to Purdue for a master's and then eventually a PhD so I could be a teacher trainer of teachers who choose to work with people with disabilities. Oh. So that was sort of my life's work until I was 50 years old.
Okay.
I think when I was 48 in 2008, we moved back here. Maybe I was younger than that. I could figure it out. But anyway, it doesn't matter. And at that time, my husband was working for the United Nations, and we were living in Mozambique, and we could have lived anywhere, as you pointed out. And I had a job early virtual days, so way before video and all that. I did have a job with something called Walden University because I lived in Mozambique. So we chose Fort Collins, one, to be with my mom who was here, and then two, knowing my husband would travel all the time. And I did need a little help with 3 kids and working full time.
Sure.
And having him gone so much. And also quality of life, quality of schools. And it's not my children's hometown and it's not my husband's, but it's certainly mine.
Right.
So because of the people that I had stayed up with since my youth and the involvement I'd had during high school and lots of different things, they remembered me and I remembered them, of course. And they asked me to run for office, to which I very sensibly said, no way. I had been on 2 school boards when I lived away. So of course I'd always been active.
Right.
But I thought that, partisan electoral politics, I never considered that as something that would be of interest. And when I finally got my mind around being elected, an election is simply an opportunity to ask the community if they'd like you to serve.
Okay.
And if they prefer the other person to serve them, then that is absolutely fine as well. So when I go into election, I always think there's no losing. Someone will become the elected, but you don't really lose an election. In my view, you're giving the community an option for representation. Once I understood that, and then two, that it was really a continuation, a lot of the things I'd been doing my whole life, it became kind of a lot less scary. And that's how I've always approached every election.
So it became less scary. Tell me a little bit more about how did you go from saying no way to knocking on 11,000 doors in one summer? Because clearly something happened there.
Yeah. You guys are way younger, but Gilligan's Island, they had this one when Gilligan didn't want to do something. He's like, you can't make me. And then there's a split screen and he's doing it. I was like, that feels like me with state rep. I'm like, no way. Hi, my name's Jeni. I'm running for state rep. Like if you could do a split screen. The knocking on doors thing was just a natural for me because I'm just an extrovert. I love people. Going up and knocking, as someone said, don't you have stranger danger or social anxiety? I said, not a minute in my entire life. And I don't know why that is. My father was the same way, a past president of the chamber here and a Fort Collins business person. Knocking on doors was easy. It was just, hi. So that was a sort of a natural fit.
Right.
And then also, I wanted people to make sure they knew who I was and what my values were so that if they wanted to vote for me when I went to represent them, they would have a really good idea of what they were going to get.
Right.
I don't put a lot of policy positions on my website, and someone asked me that even for mayor, because policy is so much more complicated and there's so many things that weave into it. It's very hard to take a hard and fast position on any one policy until you dive in and understand all the different viewpoints to make a decision or to craft that policy. So what I try to do is be clear about my values. That guides my policy decisions, if that makes sense.
I think that makes perfect sense. I think you do a really good job of that.
Thank
you. I'm going to point out too, I'm going to pause really quick. People might hear some horns in the background. We are sitting right in the heart of Old Town Fort Collins here, right on College Avenue. So people might see hear some honks and things like that, hear some traffic, but we're in one of the most special places in Fort Collins. Jeni, you mentioned the quality of life here, that being one of the things that bring you back. I think Old Town is a huge part of that in Fort Collins. And I remember, I have spoken to my friends who grew up here in the 90s, I should say, who remember being kids in the 90s when we were kids, people in my age group. And they talk about when this was just downtown and not particularly a place that anyone wanted to go, which is, hard for me to imagine, hard for a lot of people to imagine that have lived here since I have lived here in 2006. So I wanted to ask you, what are, a few things that were precursors to that? Because I think we can't talk about Fort Collins without talking about Old Town, where we're sitting right now. And there have, I think, been some pretty intentional things that have happened over the past, 20 years plus that have made this what it is today. What jumps out at you?
Oh, yeah. Well, more than 20 years, right? So 20 years just takes us back to 2004. Right. Time it's flies. Like crazy time. Right. So my parents moved here in 1964, dating myself, but that's okay. I don't know what it was in this little neighborhood I grew up with. Right across the street was Gene Mitchell, who we call the father of Old Town, and president of the school board and local developer. Then my father was part of that, developing Campus West and those sorts of things.
Oh, wow.
And our next door neighbor was a county commissioner. And, growing up, I didn't really realize that. I just thought, well, maybe that's why I also ran for, like, everyone runs for office and contributes to your community, right? Like,
so the people around
president of the school board and the county commissioner and, but the idea was a very civic-minded group, I guess my parents were part of, that were very intentionally taking what they found to be a very creative. I asked them why they chose Fort Collins. They came from grad school in Boulder, and they looked at other cities in Colorado. And they said they chose Fort Collins, one, a great place to raise kids, but two, mostly for the innovative a spirit up here, the entrepreneurial spirit, the dynamism and the excitement of trying some things new. And then also what I like to talk about the city too, you have to have a pretty high tolerance for failure if you want to encourage an entrepreneurial city as a public institution or any of the private sector, right?
Right.
And so it's okay, right? Also, I think you also have a high tolerance and a very big appreciation for small business and sort of the micro creativity that we see around.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to explain this to someone who's relatively new to town, and we were at a local restaurant, and she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well," so the server came up, and I said, "I see you're a server at this restaurant." She said, "Yes." And I said, "Do you do anything else sort of in your free time?" And she said, "Yeah, I make organic pet food." Right. And I said, "That is exactly what I just picked a totally random person, the first one." And it feels like in Fort Collins, it's super acceptable to be a server a day and make organic pet food at night.
Yes.
I give the example of my mom, who used to make greeting cards out of old tea bags, just the paper that was stained. And no one looked at her like, okay, she's crazy. They were like, oh, well, look at that. And, we have these little pockets, and then it gets this synergy, this sort of upward spiral of let's try that.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is the feel of Fort Collins. And I hope we can maintain that.
Yeah. And I think that's really exemplified in this Old Town area, just especially well. And I know it's been more than 20 years. I remember like 2006, that's when we started seeing these, I guess, higher end condo buildings being constructed. And that's when I arrived in town. Right. I remember the first thing I did when I arrived in Fort Collins, I was with my sister, who was a student at CSU vet school at the time. And I walked into this, there was an open house sign. It was like a real estate agent had an open house at one of these Pine Street loft units. I still remember unit 102, it was listed at $265,000, which might as well have been $20 million for me. I thought, this is wow. Like this, but it was so nice. And that was kind of the first. And then you saw, there's that condo building, and then Cortina, the beautiful Spanish style building, steel frame construction and concrete off at 224 Canaan Avenue was built. Then just these really impressive buildings, these really eclectic designs and architecture in places, people starting just to put their really cool boutique shops and coffee shops and even more of the neat restaurants. There was some kind of turning point then. So all of that to say, I think that Old Town exemplifies that really well. I think you touched on some of the reasons why. This brings me to it reminds me that the show Shark Tank. Have you heard of the show Shark Tank? Have you watched that before?
I have not, but I've heard of it.
You've heard of it. Like Mark Cuban's on it, and there's different people. The point of the show is people pitch business ideas. Entrepreneurs from all over the world pitch their business idea to this panel of four famous people. Mark Cuban's one of them, and there's others, and it's a prime time show on NBC. So as you can imagine, they get like many, many thousands of applications for entrepreneurs to pitch their business on live TV on this prime time show. Mm-hmm. Well, it's been around 10 seasons. I don't know. So there's a number of episodes, but Fort Collins has had 4 different entrepreneurs pitch their business on Shark Tank, which is incredible. Like per cap, I mean, that's incredible. So what you're saying about this kind of, the side hustle, they're doing something in the evening. These people are everywhere here. Like the entrepreneurial energy per capita has to be on par with, the top places in the world, in my mind.
I think so. And, my realtor who sold the house to me when we moved back in 2008, she has a patent pending. I go, what? She's like, I can't tell you. I go, what do you do? Invent stuff in your garage at night? She goes, yeah, I invent stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, so it's not only acceptable, it's sort of like, hey, what else do you got going? Yeah. I totally agree. We can't forget that Waterpik was invented here, Otterbox, Topo, things that have a national and international. And then we have our core anchor businesses, Budweiser, Woodward, was HP, Broadcom now. Mm-hmm. These are attracting, they're established corporations, but they attract entrepreneurs within those businesses as well. Not to mention all the spinoffs from Colorado State University and the good work in a lot of the veterinary sciences and all those things. It's really quite impressive. Yeah. I think, celebrity sightings in
in Fort Collins over the past several years. You may or may not have heard of these. Have you heard of some of these celebrities that have been in Fort Collins? While we're talking about this, what a neat place this is. I'm going to give you a few. Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Okay, I heard of him.
You've heard of him. Did you know he was in Fort Collins?
No.
He was. I ran into him at Sierra Training Post.
Excellent.
My family, we got there early, and it was. I asked if I could take my picture with him, and he said no, I couldn't.
He said no,
but he was polite. And others, David Letterman, Katherine Heigl, Emilio Estevez, Kevin Bacon. These are all people that have been in town and cited here. And you mentioned the CSU Veterinary Clinic. That's actually driving a lot of people here.
Oh, it is.
That's people are taking their pets, usually their dog, to the CSU Vet Clinic because world-class care.
World-class care, world-class breeders, and not to mention the people who come and go we don't know about from a different group of people, equestrian related, right? Fly in to do big horse training, right?
Yeah. So just kind of a special segment that a lot of people don't talk about. But what are some other things that people maybe don't talk about as much that you think are special about Fort Collins? Maybe let's put it in the context of you're very busy. You have a free day, a free weekend. You and your husband. What are you doing in Fort Collins? What are you doing for fun?
Oh, let's see. Well, Saturday we didn't have anything to do all day, which was when we had tons of things to do, but we didn't have anything planned, which was great. So let me try to think of what we did. It was probably pretty boring, but it was nice. Like I spent so much time out of the house that it's nice to be home. And my husband lives and works in Washington, D.C. So when we're at home together in our house in Old Town or City Park, what do we do? I don't know. We walked across the Stodgies and we had a beer with some neighbors. And then on the way home, we knocked on another neighbor's door and was like, "Can you come out and play?" He goes, "Yeah, go on, make some lentil soup and have some homemade bread." And they came over, and so
you didn't call. You just stopped and knocked on the door and said, "Can you come out and play?" I love that.
Oh yeah. So I said, we're just going to be the old people. Our kids are grown and gone, and walking around and asking our neighbors. Hey, he was like, "Yeah." And then last weekend it was so great. I went to My Sister Knits and I got some new yarn and talked to the ladies there for a little while about this and that. And they teased me for never following a pattern because I really don't. I'm like, "Oh, well, I wouldn't do the neck like this. I love this pattern, but I'm not doing the sleeves. Oh God, I've got to make it more short." And they're like, "Oh my God." And then I go to City Park 9 and I signed up for the ladies golf 5 mornings this summer every Sunday for 3 hours or 2 hours. And then I waved at the guys at the fire station. And then I stopped in and got my pet's prescription at City Park Vet. And I did that all within 2 blocks. And then I came home. So sometimes just being around the hood is good.
Yeah. And some days you don't even need to get in the car,
Oh, no. Yeah. No. Yeah. And
that's really neat.
Yeah. It's the super big neighborhood feel.
Yeah.
One thing I think I will mention, you're talking about celebrities and then some businesses that are very outward looking. I think one thing that people might not realize is how many times Fort Collins as a city, usually through me as a spokesperson, gets invited and recognized. And it's not about the recognition, but we get sought out for our advice on the national and international stage.
Really? What's an example of that?
So last year, I was one of 10 mayors from the United States to go to Dubai for the Conference of Parties 28, which is the big global climate summit.
Wow.
And there are mayors from all over the world there for the first local climate action summit.
Okay.
But only one of 10 U.S. mayors. So why would a relatively small city, I think we're 56th biggest in the country, get invited to do that? Well, it's frankly because a lot of the work that we've been doing with the residents and their voting and the things that the city's done as a result of what the residents directed them to do.
Wow.
And then last week, I put my name in and was elected to be on the board of something called ICLEI, which is the International Climate Cities Group. And from that board, I was quickly elected to be on the global, one of 9 globally, of the International Climate Cities League. So I'm not bragging, and it's not about Jeni. It's about Fort Collins. Nobody says, "Hey, let's get Jeni in here." They don't know me. They say, "Hey, let's have a representative from Fort Collins, not just on this national or international board, but be one of 9 in the global committee."
Wow.
And that was last week. So just to say in terms of what you're saying business-wise, government and civically, a lot of people look to Fort Collins for to include us in leadership in those roles, and also as partners in sharing information.
Okay.
It's not like we're going out telling people what to do, because we learn from them as well.
Right.
But it is a partnership that cities are seeking us out.
Well, that's interesting. And I think, in my world, real estate, people are seeking, this market out too. It's, it's on a lot of people's radar, people from all over the world, really. We're talking about a little bit before we started kind of rolling here. I think it's really fascinating to see people from, these other states, and more questions and types of questions that I haven't gotten in the past. People that haven't lived here for a long time, people that are learning about this market, hear something, want to know more. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about maybe just some of these questions I'm getting. I'm curious, you might be able to help me provide more depth. And this is partly selfish in that way, but it's also things that I think a lot of people are wondering about.
Sure.
So one of those things, just specifically in the Old Town area here is probably where we have this challenge more, but the transient homeless population, it feels like to me, being somebody who, my company has an office in the Boulder market as well. So I've spent a little bit of time there. And, like most people, I've traveled. You go to places like San Diego for a conference. You see these issues, lots of places. And frankly, these other places I go, I feel like they're having a much larger challenge, a much larger issue than we are here. It feels like, to me, we've done a really good job. The city, I shouldn't say the city, the people who are in charge of these things have done a really good job of addressing this. And I wonder, what could you summarize kind of what's been done or how that's looking in the future? What the strategy is there? How have we had the success we've had thus far? And how do you think we continue to have success in the future as this becomes a more densely populated area?
So I think the fundamental reason a lot of people don't feel like we've had success in this area, but so thank you for recognizing how challenging it is.
Sure.
Is collaboration. So I'll name some collaborations we have with our nonprofits, are really active in this space and have done a ton of work. We have Outreach Fort Collins, which is started from a residents group, being the first responders to people in need. Then we have the collaboration and partnership with our police force, which has been irreplaceable. They have established within their force a special unit called HOPE, which is the homeless outreach. I think the P is proactive engagement.
Oh, wow.
Specially trained people on the police force to help people who are experiencing homelessness, with the idea of helping, engaging them where they need to get the services. So then that's also cooperation with our mental health providers, our behavioral health center, which the voters voted in. It's out in the county on Taft Hill.
Yeah.
And Summit Stone is a very good mental health partner. And then frankly, the mission has partnered super well. And I want to shout out our business community for partnering with them to make sure that 24/7 shelter serves the people who need the services and can coexist in a thriving business community.
Yeah.
It's all about partnerships and caring. Some people say, yeah, but Mayor, if you build it, they will come. Well, we've done quite a few studies about that. And, people really don't travel that much for services. And my response is, if someone's in our community who needs help, as long as I'm mayor, I will try my hardest to help them without checking their ID. And, we don't say, oh, look, you're from LaPorte. I'm sorry, we can't serve you.
Right.
We don't say that. We feel like a kind, caring, compassionate community is something that I would like to extend to every person who's here. Okay.
Wow. That's great. Great answer. Another question, really completely unrelated to that, but I think it is telling of where many of the people moving here are coming from. Places like Arizona, Nevada, California, they're experiencing water issues. I'm getting the water question all the time. And it's become a pressing issue in these places, almost to the degree in certain sections of these states where it is it's actually one of the larger factors that is behind somebody moving. The cost of water, the availability of water, the future uncertainty. So if someone has that question here, and I know we're really covering a lot of ground here, right? A very, very, very big
water
spectrum.
Water is my topic, I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know that, but
I was chair of the water committee at the Capitol and also chair of ag. So I did. Once I said 80% of the water legislation, and then I thought, Jeni, you have to be accurate. So I went back and counted my 7 years down there, and it was about 80%. Yeah.
Let's talk about water.
A lot of water.
Let's talk about through the context of I'm somebody who's going to and let me set the stage this way. I'm somebody who has a lot of options of where I can live. A lot of the people I'm working with, they can live anywhere, and they're very interested in Fort Collins. They've done a lot of research, and they're at retirement age, but it's like retirement 2.0. Like they have so many good. I mean, these are fit people with disposable income, all the energy in the world, and they know that this is going to be a long-term decision for them. They might already have family here. They might be planning to recruit family here. So, that's the person, and they want to know that, hey, this is my forever spot, and I'm going to be good. So on the water topic, what I tell them? How are we looking in Fort Collins?
We can go way back to basics and think about carrying capacity, which is an ecological concept, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think about carrying capacity of our area, and you're going to need so much X amount of water. Okay, so that's the basics. Are we out of water? No. Will we in the future need to change the way we live and to accommodate the population with water? Yeah. But do you know how long of a way that is? I mean, we haven't even started to conserve, right? We still have large lawns. We still have, right? So they can move here and there'll be enough water. But I would say that we will be changing the way we live to accommodate the water, the aridification of the American West. I mean, I don't even say that it's a dry period or anything. It is, fundamentally drying out. Okay. Right. Okay. We can have enough water. We just, as I always say, sharing's hard.
Yeah.
But in Fort Collins, it's very complicated, right? Fort Collins has 6 different water districts within the city of Fort Collins. So when you're selling a property, I bet you know that you're selling it in Fort Collins Utilities. Mm-hmm. And then there's Elko, mm-hmm. right? East Larimer County. And then there's Fort Collins Loveland. Those are the big ones. Right. They have a different water rights. So I won't go into all that.
Oh, you can go into it as deep as you want. I mean, people might find this, interesting.
So who says which water district I am when you're buying a house except for me? But I know that different water rights means different things, right? So we in Fort Collins Utilities, which is not the whole city, have half of our water comes from the Poudre River, and half of it comes from a Trans Mountain diversion called the Colorado Big Thompson Project, CBT. You will hear that word. CBT shares could be curtailed if there's a curtailment on the Colorado River, which is hard for people to get their mind around. Like if the Colorado River gets curtailed.
And what does that mean, get curtailed?
Has to quit using all we are to deliver water to a compact downstream to the other states. As the headwater state, there's only 2 headwater states in the United States, us and Hawaii.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Wow.
So most of the water that falls in Colorado doesn't belong to Colorado. We have compacts with Nebraska, Kansas, New Mexico, and then all the down basin states of the Colorado River. Mm-hmm. So a curtailment would mean, say, hey, there's a net overall reduction in the Colorado River, which is what's happening now. They're reopening that compact and they're renegotiating it. And that's what you read about. If there's a curtailment on how much Colorado can use.
Who gets to decide if there's a curtailment?
Oh, it's very complicated. Eventually, if States can't do it themselves. The federal government step in. United States Supreme Court is the final stop.
The states can't get along. Federal government comes in and says, this is the way it's going to be.
Correct. And we have upper basin states and lower basin states.
Okay.
Upper basin states say the lower basin states take too much. The lower basin states, you can imagine. This is quite dicey.
Yeah.
We have a river, Colorado River Commissioner. All the states that are part of the compact do. So long multi-year negotiations. Gosh, I'm just talking about Fort Collins water now. Oh, okay. So
That's
then,
interesting, though. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And so then Fort Collins Loveland, I'm not quite sure of their portfolio, but I know a very large percent of it is Colorado Big Thompson.
Okay.
So there could be a municipal situation where if we share a backyard and I'm on Fort Collins water and I have my water from the Poudre River, you have yours from the Colorado River, and that gets cut down. I don't think the average resident in Fort Collins is going to understand why you can't wash your car and you can't.
Right.
To me, that's a risk. And I've been trying to work on that, mitigating that municipal risk for a while.
Okay.
Kind of talking about it and thinking through some legislation at the state that could make it easier for us to share. Again,
Planning ahead. Okay.
So anyway, that's the tip of the iceberg.
That might be more of a 2050 problem.
We don't know. Right now, Fort Collins Utilities has a lot of water rights.
Right. But you are taking proactive action.
We have a plan to increase our storage by 8,000 acre feet by rebuilding the Halligan Dam, which is our storage.
Okay.
And acquiring about 500 acre feet more water. We think that would get us to 2065. But to me, that's under current assumptions. So, I mean, I've been, as you have, probably a lot of places around the world, and, we could conserve more.
Right. Right. Yeah. And they are in other parts of the country. So I think that model is probably out there and taking some best practices.
Yeah.
So that could be something that helps in time too when needed, but we're not there yet.
That's right. That's right. And the state will take actions. They did some bills this year about water conservation, and we're looking at some increased water conservation in Fort Collins too.
Okay.
Yeah.
That brings me to the third, I kind of rank these. It's funny. I go through all these questions, these clients, and what are the questions? And the train is the other big one. And this might be a much shorter conversation. The train goes through Old Town. I tell people when I was in my, it's
train.
Yeah. Many of us find it to be kind of a charming thing. And I fall into that camp. I, for a while, lived right on Mason, and this is back when, before they replaced the rail line, which, what was that? 10 years ago? More? No, it was more than that, like 15 years ago. And, it went 4.5 miles an hour. Then after they replaced the line, they could go 9 miles an hour. So you don't have to wait as long as you did before hearing that horn. And I've always thought it was kind of charming too, but that is something when people come here from out of state, outside of this market. This happened last summer. A client who's now become a friend, he ended up buying a place that's along the tracks. He got comfortable with it, like many people do, most people do. But the first time he heard that come through, he thought, this must be some mistake.
Small town.
Did something get rerouted the wrong way? I mean, baffled. And there was the question. And then you get the question from, how close are you to the train? What's happening to the train? Do you think there's any chance at any point in the future that there would be a quiet zone in the Old Town area? It seems to me like that, in digging into that myself, the barriers to that happening, the hurdles are, I don't know what word to use other than insurmountable.
So there's a lot to this, right? So I think you're correct not to ask, can we move the train? Probably not.
Actually, I didn't even think of that as a possibility. I thought, well, maybe we could do a quiet zone, but you could actually reroute it.
No.
Okay.
But that's why I was like, oh, God, he's not going to ask me that. So the quiet zone is a great idea. We've been working on that for years with the Federal Rail Association. Wow. Is that a bureaucracy? Two, you can imagine if you're a federal agency and you lighten up safety, that's how they see it. We think we could do it maintaining all the safety. But could you imagine a federal agency lightening up safety and then having something happen? The lawsuits that,
Right.
So their position is always going to be that.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we've been working on, oh my word, everything you can imagine in safety, quiet zones, track the match that's not all of it. Now it's kind of interesting that's happening in the train space for all the people who get upset at the train. People ask me like, what keeps you up at night is a common question. I always am like the train. That's my standing joke. It also makes me feel like I'm home when I hear that. I'm like, oh, I'm home. I'm in Fort Collins. So
right.
I'm also a fan.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought I was alone until I just now.
There are other people too. There are other people too. I don't think we're alone.
Right.
So,
but one interesting development that's coming now, and maybe you've heard our governor talk about Front Range passenger rail.
No.
Oh, yes.
Maybe an article. I think now that you mention it, I read about it briefly, and I'll tell you what entered my brain was, oh, this is another one of those things that's would be amazing, but not going to happen.
Correct. That's what I always think too.
Mm-hmm.
Until this year, I read the proposal of how it could possibly come to be.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So was it BNSF runs through Fort Collins. And so we would use existing rail. And then to convert to passenger, you have to add safety devices and some sensors underneath all these things. But I started to see it coming together in the way the governor's team explained it to me in terms of the federal dollars that could come, the state dollars, and how we would collaborate with the existing rail company. And they've told me, and it's written up, that the most plausible first line would probably be Fort Collins, Longmont, Boulder, Denver. So for all the years when I'm thinking or hearing people saying, get the train out of Fort Collins, all of a sudden it could be this big asset, right?
Yeah.
There used to be passenger rail to Denver a million years ago, before me. Just
okay.
For the record. You see those pictures? I'm not in them.
Before you.
But that is really something that's very enticing, I think, especially if we can get that done. And this
so I'm clear, would use that same rail line.
Yeah.
That
so you collaborate
incredible.
with the freight, and then you add the passenger, and then
Wow.
So they did sort of a proof of concept a couple weeks ago. I saw a picture. I was invited. I couldn't make it. The governor and the president of the Senate were riding. They had a passenger car on the freight rail. So
wow. Now that I'm excited about it, timeline. What
I know.
Did they share any projected timelines, anything like that?
It's probably not 20 tomorrow, but
okay.
It is. They are definitely working on. There's a lot of legislation at the state, enabling legislation, because different things and jurisdictions have to happen. You can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But that legislation's been lined up, and they're trying to line up the money, and it could be really exciting.
That's incredibly exciting. Well, wow. Thank you for that. I think everyone's going to find that super interesting. And, some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
You mentioned Stodgy Brewery earlier.
Yeah.
Love that place.
Yeah.
That's great. So favorite brewery in Fort Collins?
Oh, that is so mean.
Because,
we
are, for everyone listening, known as the Napa Valley of beer.
Right.
And I think the reason you're saying it so means because people might listen to this and think,
then
well, I wanted,
it's like if I wear a topo jacket, somebody's going to go, well, what about this? What? I'm like,
right.
All right. Okay, so I am partial to Stodgy's, and I can't not mention Horse and Dragon.
That was great.
And then I go to Mythmaker too. Over there on tap. I live on Mulberry Street at City Park.
Oh, yeah.
So I say,
Mythmaker. I haven't heard of Mythmaker. It's on tap.
Yeah, it's just over there by King Soopers.
Okay.
And then Horse and Dragon.
Okay. Oh, those first two I know well. Mythmaker we'll have to check out. Shout out to Mythmaker.
I like the Gilded Goat. I could keep going.
You could keep going. Okay. Well, those are some good ones. Those are some really good ones, and some that I think not everyone has heard of also. What about coffee shop?
Again, I like kind of going. There's the Foxton, which is really great. It's on the port.
Oh, you have some off the beaten path ones. This is good. Tell us about Foxton, because I go everywhere. I don't know that.
So when I get to choose where I meet someone, I try to just bike over there. So again, I live on City Park.
Right.
Since I was recently doxxed like a million times by a group in town, I'm like, yeah, everybody knows where I live anyway. I don't think it really hurt me.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Foxton is on the port.
Okay.
And then there's Cups on Taft Hill.
Yeah, I know that one. That's a good
yeah.
one.
And so I try to kind of just keep it hyper local for me. Like, and then if I'm out and about, I'll go to Harbinger, I'll go to Lima, I'll just go all around.
There you go. Those are all really good
A lot
ones.
of coffee, bean cycle, all of it.
We're really well known for just, breakfast spots too in Fort Collins, specifically in Old Town. What about breakfast? You have somebody who's visiting for a weekend. You're going to go out for breakfast and maybe they're just passing through town. Where do you go?
Well, I have to say Silver Grill.
Yeah.
And there's Vern's, but that's in LaPorte. So let's see. I used to just go out for breakfast all the time. They're all good. I don't. Yeah, I guess my first go-to would be Silver Grill.
That's a great choice. Do you get the cinnamon roll there?
Anything you order in my younger days.
Okay.
I do a lot of running, so I can't put down too many cinnamon rolls and still try to hit the trail.
So everybody knows they have an incredible cinnamon roll. Their whole menu is amazing. So great choice. Okay. What about date night? You and your husband are going on a date. Where do you go?
Date night. Ooh. Sometimes we like to just go to the Lyric. We'll do like trivia night or just catch a movie there or hang out in the backyard there. Some good music there sometimes.
Lyric's a great spot.
I like that. My husband's he's an economist, so pretty low-key guy. And then frankly, I have a lot of like work engagements. So usually if he wants a date night, I'm like, okay, come to this with me. But really, honestly, what I like about Fort Collins is there's something for everyone. Right. If you want to have good ethnic food, you can do that. We eat Indian a lot.
What's your go-to for Indian restaurant?
It's on Olive. What's that one?
I know what one you're talking about. Taj Mahal. Yeah, yes, the Taj Mahal.
Yeah. And then sometimes, again, because we're out so much, I'm a big pizza maker. So I have a wood-fired pizza oven in my back. And then I have an uni, too, that's kind of repetitive. But, I'm ready for any eventuality. And
what's the difference between a pizza maker and an uni? I thought the uni's a pizza maker,
is like
right?
A portable one. And then the other one is like installed with the big pizza oven that I had imported from California. And then it's yeah.
So maybe it's just how much pizza are you making?
Yeah, and how big of a deal is it? Then I like to host people in my home. So I have a lot of dinner parties. And I like to cook, so I make a lot of stuff.
Oh, fun. Well, that sounds amazing. Oh, great. Well, thank you for your time. One last thing. So I, 3 years ago now, started a pickleball league in Fort Collins. And I think the thing that kind of preceded that was, my wife and I had 2 kids and stage of life. And all of a sudden you find yourself kind of hanging out a little bit less with friends. And so I wanted something just to get the guys together. And this kind of grew into a thing. So it's been really fun. And we do that in the summer months. And I'm just telling everybody that, your entry fee this year is going into a charity fund. And how I'm going to spend that charity fund is everyone who's on this podcast, like you, gets to choose a charity. And I'll divide that fund up equally, and every charity will get a donation. So the last question is, which local charity would you like that to go to?
Oh, wow. There's so many great nonprofits, so they're doing great, great work. Oh, you make me choose?
And it can be a couple, too. It can be 2 or 3.
Sometimes United Way, because they are the conglomeration of nonprofits, and then they can see where the need is the greatest. Mm-hmm. That's a good one. Saba.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, is a good one. Well, they're all good, and they all serve people in need. I would look also to some of the smaller ones that maybe aren't. I've been just, probably those.
Okay. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And I said that was my last question, but it's really not, because I forgot one.
Okay.
What are your future plans? You've been mayor since 2021. Do you want to, what does the future look like?
You know what I say? You know how I like to pay attention to what's in front of me? I always say I didn't get elected to get reelected. Okay. I got elected to serve my term.
Right.
For the full term. And that's what I'm focused on doing.
And how long does that term go?
The people of Fort Collins would like the mayor to run every 2 years.
Okay.
And only for a maximum of 6 years.
Okay.
So if I choose to, I could run one more time in November of 25.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and honestly, I just try to do what's in front of me as best I can. And things just kind of happen. I don't know, kind of go with the flow.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, if people want to learn more about you and potentially just vote for you in the future and support you in some way or another, how can they learn more about you?
Honestly, they can call me I have coffee or meet with really anybody, anytime if they want. I don't keep my website up when I'm not running for office because I don't do that sort of thing.
Okay.
Honestly, they can just write me at my mayor address is jarndt@fcgov.com.
Okay.
My personal cell phone is 970-231-5090. And they can usually texting is the best because I'm in a meeting, but I can get right back to them. And I'm happy to meet anybody. Honestly, if someone said, why do you do this work? I said, honestly, the bottom line is I really love people. Right. I like the thinky ones, the grumpy ones, the difficult ones, all different kinds of people make up our community. And I'm frankly equally interested in all of them.
That's amazing. And we can put that information in the show notes too.
Yep.
Thank you so much. This was an honor and a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
It really was. Me. I just really appreciate your time. And I think everybody is going to really enjoy this one. So thank you, Jeni.
Thank you.